What's going on, team? This is the Daily Rage Quit with your host, Weiss, and the one, the only, Steelman.
How's it going, all?
Guys, this is an exciting episode for Steelman and I. Being lifelong gamers, nothing gets us more amped for gaming than watching the new technology coming through. So today's episode is all about the tech demo that the Epic team released for the Unreal Engine 5. Teaser, that's a PlayStation 5 running the tech demo, which even gets us more amped as we are PlayStation console runners. It's going to be awesome, and there's a lot to talk about during this.
Yeah, this was an exciting one, man. The demo looked beautiful. I mean, that was the most important thing that comes out of this, right? Is that we look at it and we're just like in awe. It's gorgeous. It's flawless. I mean, everything looks realistic. It looks as real as it can get. I can't even picture it getting any realer than what we have right now. That was the number one takeaway for me, is that, wow, this is impressive stuff.
I'll give you two things for sure. From a marketing perspective, one, Unreal and the Epic team killed it, right? They had the right people in there, which was a creative director and a tech director running the program, talking about the creative direction, but also talking about the technology. The timing of it was perfect. The walkthrough was perfect. And here's the biggest thing. This is where you start to see some of the battling going on. And this is where PlayStation really and Sony take the next level over Microsoft and Xbox, which is this is on their system. They haven't really said much. We got what, Steelman? We got a developer demo on the system itself for PlayStation, and then now we're actually truly getting the graphical enhancements that are going to happen with the new consoles and showing the true power of what the PlayStations could be able to bring. And I think it marries well together in this particular segment.
Yeah, I think the cool thing was too that Epic and Unreal came out and were like, they're not tied to Sony or PlayStation 5 for their development. Like, they're not only working with them, they're working with both. And they came out and were like, we were really impressed with the PlayStation 5 and how it handled some of this stuff. Like, it was just like, oh, that's kind of high praises. That's pretty cool. Like, to hear some devs, like big time devs, being like, yeah, like, this thing's an impressive machine. So, like, that's good news. That's awesome. Like, glad to hear that. And obviously it showed in the demo. Pretty exciting stuff if you're a Sony fan, as we are. I mean, I'm a fan of everything. I'm a fan of competition. I love to see the competition because competition only drives, the end result up for the consumer. We only get better results because of competition. So I love to see Xbox do well too. I'm not gonna hate. But yeah, it looks promising. Looks cool.
Well, I'm going to fucking hate. Fuck that. PlayStation going all the way. It's going to be so sick. I mean, let's dive right into the tech demo. There were 5 major sections that were presented within the tech demo. We're going to talk about Lumen, which is the lighting mechanics. Insane. We're going to talk about Nanite, which is their virtualized geometry, which is insane. We're going to talk about audio enhancements. We're going to talk about their effects system with the AI. You saw it with the bats, and we'll dive a little bit into that. And then finally, we're going to kick it off at the final part, which is the motion warping for characters. And I think it's really cool to understand where gaming can go to the next level. Right? It's not just about graphics. It's about how do you immerse yourself into games and giving these developers the ability and the technology to really push themselves to another level and bring this new experience to people like us. And the first thing I want to hit is the Lumen system. I mean, when they talk about no light maps, and we're just talking about how light naturally moves and, more importantly, naturally bounces in an environment, there was no better way to demonstrate that in this tech demo than in a cave. You had the light streaming from the left, and you could tell based off the tech direction how well it was bouncing. And it was so cool because not only is it bouncing and illuminating different areas, but also the shadowing casts that are happening throughout it are just so detailed. It's not just etched in shadowing. It's not it's not just this artificial shadowing. It is truly dynamic in whichever way the light is coming in and blooming the area is just incredible.
Yeah, I think one of the things they mentioned is that even the shadows are picture accurate. So the shadows actually have their own triangles, and they're all made up of these millions of triangles as well. When they did that thing where they shifted the light source and made it like really rapidly, they shifted the light source from one side of the cave to the other, and like all the shadows changed, everything changed instantly. And like it was, there was no lag in it, there was no loading or anything like that. It just happened instantly. I was like, "Ooh, that's pretty cool." Like that was pretty neat. The next step for me is like then you bring like weather into it, and you can bring like a rainstorm when it's like sunny out, and like how the light reflects off the rain, or if it just finished raining and buildings are dripping with water, and there's the sun has come out, or the sun's getting low in the sky, and it's like you see some of these cool environments, and you put that into like a multiplayer, and you have a battlefield or something like that going down. Like that would be cool. Like I'd love to see that stuff start to appear. We've done a little bit of that, but it's always been like set up, right? The changing weather in a game has always been kind of like set up and not random. I think they could randomize it more with this. It'll be cool to see.
I think one of the things that made me think about it right away with lighting is when it's snow, right? So like, let's say you're in the Arctic or something like that. The difference in how light reflects off of snow compared to like almost iced over snow is just super dramatically different. I wonder how bright and colorful it truly becomes with those whites that are in there in the snow. If it's actually going to truly illuminate even more, almost like blinding, but shouldn't be blinding because we need to be able to see the game. We shouldn't have to change the fucking lighting system and our settings. It should just be natural and it should feel good. And I think lighting is one way to truly enhance gaming moving to the future.
Yeah, I think that would be interesting too. I don't know how that'll play. Obviously, we'll just get a good glimpse of that. Sorry, there's a helicopter going over, but yeah, I think it'll be cool to see how weather and plays and into lighting. Like it's another level of immersion, like you talked about. Like we want to see this. Like we want to be immersed in the game. Like that's the whole point of it. So this is getting us closer and closer to real life stuff. So it only makes me more excited, and I think it's going to be awesome.
Now, the next thing we have to talk about, and this is something that really gets me really going, is their nanite system. So right now, what they're describing the nanite system is essentially that artists no longer have to worry about polygon counts, because now the way in which the environment is built by developers is through triangles, which are going to essentially eliminate the pixel count, or they should match. I make sure I am getting that correct. But more importantly, it's supposed to make it easier for creative teams out in these developing teams to really build out these maps, build out these caves like they've shown, and environments in a much more simpler and detailed fashion without worrying about lag, without worrying about how much they're actually loading.
Yeah, I think this comes down to the SSD, the solid state drives too. I mean, like being able to move that much data that quickly is really key here. And it's cool to hear that they're taking the limitations off on developers. Like if you want to create something that's truly beautiful and it needs more detail, and in the past you would have been like, hey, you got to hold up on this because it's not going to load right, or it's going to take a while to load, or it's going to screw things up. Like now that's off. And they did that in the demo. They showed that those statues, right? They're like, oh, in this room we have 500 of these statues, and the light is all moving off of them at the same time. There's trillions of trillions of triangles, and you're just like, my mind's just blowing as like he rifles off these numbers, and I'm just like, well, okay, I can't even imagine what that looks like. But yeah, like it was cool to hear like that's the level of detail they have, and it stretches all the way out to the horizon. And it doesn't lag the game down or bog it down or slow it up, or there's no loading screens or and stuff like that. Still, it's just really, really kind of cool.
It's what I wish they would have shown, which I'm sure we'll get lots more of, is okay. So you have triangles as like the new geometry that they're going to be using within building these environments. What's it like when they crumble? right? When an environment starts to become destructive. We saw a little bit of like the cave coming apart and stuff like that, but I'm talking about like skyscrapers. I'm talking about when we're in urban warfare. What happens? Like, how dynamic is it? Because a lot of times what we see is just naturally falls the same exact way every time. We actually see like a dynamic way in which it dissolves. If a building takes a rocket, if a meteorite hits the ground, if it hits the water, does the water expand naturally? Like, it's just going to be so interesting what they'll be able to do. And I think what's the coolest thing about this that really stood out to me is that it's supposed to be easy to use. So it requires less technical dev work and opens up the creative piece for those artists. Will we actually see an immersion of indie developers coming through? They're going to be creating new games that we need, new types of, let's say, new types of battle royales, new types of RPGs, new types of first-person shooters. I'm just so curious, and if they can make it easy enough for people who aren't as technical savvy in developing games, if they're actually going to allow that creativity to really flourish and allow new developers to come out and create new stuff. That's what gets me amped.
Yeah, I think the short answer is yes. Like, definitely, you're going to see a bunch of people step up. When you have less things to worry about, like if you don't have to worry about the minutia all the time as a developer, it gives you a chance to actually broaden your skill set, like gets your mind a chance to expand. And I think all of those things are going to occur once you start doing things like this, where it's like, hey, listen, we'll handle these small things so you guys can focus on the bigger things and being creative and being, and getting people to that next level of immersion. And I think that's what this is doing. And I think that's the cool part. And like you said, like, yeah, now, maybe that's going to give some little indie studio a chance to compete with the big guys, because that makes things less expensive too. That's the other part of it. Like, when you're spending less time, you're spending less money on things, that means the smaller guys can get a shot at it. So, and hopefully that's the case. I think the video game industry sometimes gets a little bit stale with the bigger guys in play, and they needs to be shaken up from time to time and need to have some competition. For every once in a while, you get some of these smaller studios biting at their heels, and they start to kind of ramp up their own work a little bit, and that's only a good thing. Again, competition always a good thing. But also, just to kind of touch back on what you're saying, I'd love to see the dynamic environments, lighting, and like you were saying, in an urban setting. We're going back to Battlefield. We love Battlefield. Dude, the one thing we love about Battlefield is the destructive environments. It allows you to have a multiplayer game that is different every single time you play it, because there's no two buildings that destroy the exact same way every single time. So where you might have cover one time, you might not the next, and that makes it dynamic, it makes it fresh. And you add this stuff into the mix where buildings are crumbling like in smaller pieces, they don't need to come down in bigger pieces or like in a structured way, or like the building just doesn't collapse on itself after it takes a certain amount of damage. It falls apart piece by piece. Those pieces lay there. They can stay there the whole game. They might fall halfway down and lean up against the wall, providing cover for somebody. It might fall all the way to the ground. And you might be able to have that stuff now happen, and that's pretty cool. Like, I think you make it even more of a dynamic environment now. I think that's awesome. So just to go touch back on that as well. So
I'm glad we share that same passion.
Yeah.
I wish we could have reviewed Battlefield 5 a lot better. Sorry, guys, but that's the way the shit crumbles, unfortunately.
Gotta be honest.
So the next part, I know this is a Steelman fanatic piece. He gets a huge boner over this, which is the audio enhancements that they're making, especially with sound and sound effects, and it's playing an important role in this game. In this tech demo, what you could hear and see, and as long as you had really good headphones on, you could hear the spatial audio that's happening. So everything from rocks falling from the top all the way to the character making a noise and having it echo, you really started to hear where sound was coming from and how it was honestly bouncing from one wall to another, because that's how it works in real life, right? It continues to bounce until it fades. So it's
Yeah.
really interesting how they really touched on the audio, and it wasn't even a big piece. They kind of just went, man, and that was it. It wasn't even huge, but like for us, and for everybody that I know that's listening to this, we all got killer headphones. We've got surround sound. We spent a ton of money on our fucking headphones, and we're like, where's the best audio? I just don't need fucking bass. I don't need to know if steps are up or down or left or right. Like, I want real audio quality, and I think they underplayed it, which is fine, because it wasn't about the audio. It was about the tech that the PlayStation 5 is providing to run this particular tech demo. But the audio gets me actually super excited as well.
Yeah, audio is awesome. It's like kind of the one of the forgotten frontiers of gaming, right? Like, we've focused so much on visuals and graphics for so long, and rightfully so. Your eyes are digesting this information first and primary, but secondary is audio, and audio is very important, and companies have done a good job of paying attention to it in the last few years. But I think with the PlayStation 5, Sony looks to be taking it to the next level. And Mark Cerny talked about this extensively during their PlayStation talk. And he really touched on it and really seemed passionate about it and wanted to tackle audio as the next big thing. And then in this demo, you hear it and you see it. It's, you see the rocks bouncing and you hear them echoing off the cave as you would expect that to in real life, and that is the spatialized audio. And they're talking about they're actually sampling real caves for this demo. They went and sampled real caves and got audio out of it, and then were able to accurately put that in the game. I mean, it's one thing to go sample audio out of a cave. It's another thing to put it in the game and have it sound exactly the way you want it to sound. That's the hard part. Anyone can go take a bunch of expensive speakers and set them up in a cave and toss rocks around. It's getting them to be in the game and look and the look and the visualization and the audio to match up. And that's what I saw in that demo, and I was like very excited about, especially with what the PlayStation 5 has seemed to be focusing on, some spatialized audio in their development. So again, they didn't touch on it a whole lot. They did kind of just skirt over it and talk about it a little bit, but yeah, we're excited about this one because I think this could make the PlayStation 5 set it above the Xbox significantly, if they can tackle the audio, because audio is still needs improvement in the games as they are right now.
Let's put into a different visualization. So let's say you and I are in a building in a first-person shooter, and we're sitting there, and we're surrounded by enemies, and all of a sudden, a lot of us, and I know everyone that's listening feels the same exact way. We're listening for footsteps, and footsteps are honestly like four directional, right? It's up, it's down, it's left, it's right, and they're pretty much the same sound. But if they tackle audio the correct way, imagine this: you're able to now figure out the depth of when someone's coming. So now when I'm communicating with Steelman, I'm like, dude, this person's a little far away. We can set up a trap. We have not enough time to reload or anything like that. Or if they sound really close, you can warn each other right away, like, that's super close. Let's get in there. We're getting closer with games each and every time. But if the audio can get there with the new technology that's coming out from Unreal, this could dynamically change the game from an audio perspective. The way you approach things, the way you think about going after an objective, it's just totally different. But in order to do that, right, if the PlayStation and Unreal are working together on the audio piece, my other question becomes, like, are we actually going to see new headsets coming out for PlayStation? I hope, Steelman, for the love of fucking God, they don't give these one little wires. Remember the wire they'll give you, and it's like a little fucking microphone that goes into one ear? Like, that is fucking stupid. So Sony, for the love of God, do not give us that ever again. It was the fucking dumbest move on the planet. Give us a fucking real headset, like you did with your Bluetooth headsets with the gold editions and all that, but now come out with something new. Because in order to make the audio real, we need the right hardware to run it now.
Totally agree. Wouldn't mind paying extra. I'd pay $800 for a PlayStation 5 that came with a headset that made me feel like I was in the game. No problem. Don't mind it. But don't give me something that's gimmicky either. Like, don't say it's going to change my life with, groundbreaking audio, and it's a piece of shit. I don't want some crappy audio. So yeah, like I think we talked about this before too. Footsteps are so big in games, right? You hear people complain about footsteps in multiplayer games every single game that comes out. Battlefield, Call of Duty, Warzone, even what's it called, Apex. I mean, there were footstep issues in each and every single one of those games, and I could probably rifle off 100 more of them that I have over the years. And it's just like that classic, like clunk, 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 clunk. Here comes an enemy. Like there's no variation to it. It's just like it gets a little bit louder as they get closer, and that's about it. Like I want more out of it, and I think everyone wants more out of it, and I think this will give us that if it's used correctly. I think the ability is there, and hopefully that's what we're going to get, because we had talked earlier that games start to use crutches for the players in there to discover audio. I'm playing The Last of Us right now, and one of the crutches they use in that game is that you hold down R1, and you're able to hear. You go into this black and white mode, and you're able to hear enemies from a distance, and they show up through walls and stuff. But that only exists because the footsteps aren't detailed enough that you can't hear them on your own when you're walking next to them if you're quiet. If you were able to do that, you wouldn't need crutches in video games that took you out of the immersion of the game, which is create something that's totally fictitious where he can see through walls using sonar now in a realistic zombie game. It's supposed to be realistic. There's no sci-fi aspect to it other than it's a zombie game. But they don't have superpowers or anything, and that takes away from the immersion. You get rid of that, and you put footsteps in that you can hear enemies, and there's 3 guys walking around in the room next to you, and you know that there's 3 guys in there, and you can kind of figure out where they are. Like, game changer, huge game changer, man. Like you're keeping the player in that game longer, and they're immersed longer, which is what it's all about. So, let's get there. I think we're gonna get there. I hope we are. So.
Big one on audio, guys. There wasn't a whole lot on the audio, but Steelman and I have been doing a lot of thinking around. One thing that I am looking interested in right now with the tech demo as well is the effect system. They talked a little bit about the effect system, especially with the bats. The bats flew out and they interacted with the environment. For me, I can't wait to hear more about that and what that technology means. But I can imagine that, especially when you're playing games like The Witcher, or let's just talk about CD Projekt, right? Let's talk about Cyberpunk. Let's talk about Last of Us. Let's talk about Uncharted. Let's talk about, GTA. Any one of these huge monster open worlds where AI just has a better understanding of the environment they're in. So if a tree is falling, it should dodge the tree. Right. Yeah. But if the tree falls, it should also be like, whoa, there's cover, and I could jump behind it to get cover all of a sudden. Or if a building's falling, how do they react? Like, are they just like standing there and they're running away and they get crushed? Or like, if they know they're going to die, do they put their hands up in the air and like go, oh no, and then they eat it, right? Yeah. Or if monsters are jumping from one tree to another, like how are they picking and choosing? So it's like it's a thoughtful process. It just gets me intrigued a little bit more. And I'll be honest with you, Steven, like games today in the AI are pretty good. They're really good, actually. They've come long ways of how just the other characters in the AI and how they work are very strong. This could just change it again and enhance it even more because it's all about that immersion. Don't take the gamer out. Don't make them realize what the fuck was that character doing. Make them more thoughtful and be like, it's just a fluid game.
Yeah, I think Red Dead started to kind of do that pretty well. They spent a lot of time on how characters kind of interacted with each other, and although a lot of those things were kind of scripted, and you could tell that they're scripted, there was also some stuff where you could see the characters were kind of reacting to their environment. Like this is another thing I would love to see more of. Just basically characters that aren't the player character interacting with the environment, with the player character in a manner that is natural. It's, they're fearful if you're a scary person, or if you're putting them in danger or something, or if they're, maybe they're appreciative of you if you've done something good for them. Like, and Red Dead did do a little bit of that, but I want to see more of it. And I think, all these games can benefit from that stuff too. I think that would be awesome.
So one of the last things we definitely want to talk about with everybody here that we saw in the tech demo that they talked about was motion warping for characters. So for those of you, the motion warping is, put it into this perspective, predictive foot placement when you're climbing, natural elements of you when she's climbing through that slither of a wall, her hands go against the wall, and it's not just placed on a block, it's like totally gripping certain things, and it's naturally doing that. Even with the hair as well, or her scarf, all of a sudden you're starting to see more warping and it actually being included into the game and into the engine. So again, less developer time spending on, well, what's this action going to mean? You have to choreograph the whole thing. Potentially this means, okay, if object moves to X and goes to Y, it knows exactly how to interact with the entire environment from X to Y. And I don't ever have to worry about that. I don't have to, figure out how her hands go up if she gets scared or anything like that. It could naturally possibly do that. That actually gets me amped. It makes me think from a visual perspective. Steelman, you and I were talking about it. Let's say you're playing a first-person shooter. And normally what happens is you get against a wall and it's just linear, right? It's like a box against a wall. It's just something that prevents you from moving to another area. But you don't interact with it. And even when you see it from a third-person perspective, that character just looks like it's just stationary, aiming, and ready to go, but not really interacting with the wall. Imagine if this effect system, motion warping, allows you to kind of lean against the wall, and you could see it from your own perspective, and the people that can see you outside that perspective can see it too. I think it just adds another element of immersion. And all of a sudden the game becomes, again, and I'm coming to this word every single time, more fluid. You're not being taken out of the game, you're staying in the game. I think that's super important. I think it comes to the technology too. It's the technology that can help drive that.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think what you nailed it too is like a multiplayer game, seeing someone do that across the room as you're ready to enter a room and sweep a room. Cool. That would be awesome. Another thing, audio. I mean, when you're up against that wall and your clothing is rigid and it's scraping against that wall, you're going to get a little bit of sound feedback. Are we going to get that? I think that would be cool as well. Audio again, there it is. But yeah, like all of this stuff is really interesting. It's all next level thinking, right? It's all that, how do we get it more realistic? Not just graphics, not just making it look pretty. It's actually how all of these things relate spatially in the environment and with the character. How the audio plays in at the same time, adding more level of detail is going to be the key driver for PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, and PC as well. Like it's going to be the next level of the next generation of consoles.
Yep, and I know one thing you caught at the end there, Steelman, is when she's going through the wall, right? Mm-hmm. There's a particular piece where she's crawling through a tight space, and there's been a lot of reaction to that, and there was a response. So if you could go through that real quick, that'd be super important.
Yeah, I think Unreal really did an awesome job with this one. As many people know, when you're playing games like God of War and Last of Us and stuff like that, you have set sequences where you go through an area, and it's called, like, they're hidden load screens, right? You crawl through a crawl space that's tight, and it allows the area on the other side of the crawl space to load. This has been a common disguise for games for the last generation of consoles. And now moving forward, Sony has said that they're doing away with those, and the SSD should solve those problems. And when we saw this demo, people immediately jumped down Unreal's throat and said, hey, there's a hidden load screen there when she walks through, and that the crevice or that cracked door or whatever, that's a load screen. And Unreal came out actually and nipped it in the bud and said, no, it's not a load screen. There is not a load screen in there, and said, yeah, you guys are full of shit. There's no load screens. This is all there in front of you on your screen. And I thought that was really awesome because it was like one of those telltale moments. It's like, all right, are they telling the truth? Like, or are they still load screens? Here we go. And they just came out and they're like, nope, no load screen. Sorry, guys. It was kind of neat. So I'm excited about that. I thought that was an awesome thing for them just to come out and say that.
I think for a final thought here, guys, from what we saw in the tech demo, just from my perspective, one, bravo on Sony's end for really being thoughtful on how they're marketing their platform. This is through a third party it doesn't pick and choose its battles. It just develops technology for developers to make games for any console. So bravo for PlayStation to run that. Bravo for the technology that the PlayStation and Sony were able to introduce, showing that power right after a developer conference. So I thought that was an incredible marketing move on their part. And give it up for Epic. I mean, the Unreal Engine, first of all, is like the past generation, is free, so people can learn how to use it anytime. And I would imagine they're going to probably go in a similar direction because remember, the Unreal Engine is owned by Epic. Epic has their own games that they got to worry about too, and they run the engine that's not just doing for video games but other things as well. So it's really fascinating to see how they're trying to push the envelope every single level. And I think this, Steelman, if you agree with me or not, this truly tells me how the gaming industry can change by immersing players even more. And I think when we get there, and we're not going to get there right away, right? We're going to see some cool stuff, but I think as this new systems start to show their true strength and developers start to understand what that means, I think the entertainment value of gaming will drastically change. There's going to be a pivot and a shift in the player base, the way we think about games, and more importantly, what developers are going to start coming out. I think it's going to be insane.
I agree. It's only up from here. It's weird. You reach the end of the visuals, and you're kind of like, oh, where else can they go from here? I mean, there's not much upside. And then this video comes out, and you're like, oh, okay, there's a lot of upside. So, video games are still growing. They're still getting better, and that's cool to watch because, I've been in a spot for a while where I've seen some pretty realistic games, and I'm like, man, this looks like Red Dead was one of them. I'm like, this looks really good. It looks really real. And then this comes out, and you're like, man, it looks a little archaic now. Like, this actually looks real. Like, so it's really neat, man. I'm excited. I'm excited once again. Right when I was like, man, maybe PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X don't really have anything to really improve upon. They do, and we're excited for it now. It's obvious that there's some growth that's occurred, and it's going to be awesome. We're gonna be touching on this more and more. We're gonna follow it closely. We hope you guys stay tuned for it because we're excited. We want to spread that excitement to you and keep going with it. So as more of this stuff comes out, we'll be talking about it. And we just hope that, audio and visuals just start improving and more, and, the creative flow gets better. And hey, all the devs out there, thank you. You guys are awesome. You guys are doing really cool stuff, and we appreciate you guys. So keep it up.
I'll tell you, team, this is what, as all of us are gamers, this is what we get excited about. So thank you so much for tuning in to the Daily Rage Quit. Talking about the Unreal 5 tech demo using the PlayStation 5. Bravo to Sony and to the PlayStation teams and to the teams at Epic. Be sure to subscribe, like or dislike. We need to know if you like our shit or not. And of course, drop a comment down below. We love to keep the conversation going. But thank you all very much for tuning in. Peace.
Later, y'all.